As with all of our choices, the extent to which we can be intentional and deliberate can really drive our impact. Our next panel builds on that. I'm pleased to introduce Emily Guadagnoli, the head of marketing, who's going to lead this conversation with Dr. Lisette Cooper, Vice Chair of Fiduciary Trust International, to talk about how your capital can play a meaningful role in decisions and priorities that go beyond an individual investment. Emily, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Paulina. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. It's truly an honor for me to have the opportunity to introduce Lisette Cooper and share her stories with you today. I've had the opportunity to work with Lisette for nearly 10 years now, first at Athena Capital Advisors, now at Fiduciary Trust International. We've worked together to shape and share many of the ideas and experiences and the stories that she's going to discuss today. So Lisette, it's especially meaningful for me to be part of this conversation. Thank you. Lisette is Vice Chair of Fiduciary Trust International and the founder and former CEO of Athena Capital Advisors, a firm widely regarded for its early leadership in impact investing. And one of the perspectives that I've always really appreciated about Lisette is that she really encourages investors to think differently, creatively about their capital, not just as something financial, but as a way to engage meaningfully with the world around us. So today, Lisette is going to share some of her experiences and convictions that shaped her work, how shareholder engagement has become a meaningful part of the conversation she has with clients, and why she believes that women and investors can play a more meaningful part, more intentional role with their investments. So thank you, Lisette, for being here. Okay, I'm going to start from the very beginning because your path has been anything but linear. You moved a lot as a child. You've made some really meaningful pivots in your career over time. But looking back at your formative years, how did those experiences, or what did they teach you about resiliency, adaptability, and then even finding opportunities in some unexpected places?
Thank you so much, Emily. It's just a delight to be here with you today, and a delight to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for coming. And you're absolutely right. I did move around a lot as a child. I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, to teenage parents. And over my lifetime, I lived in 10 different places in 6 different states. We moved to Nashville, Tennessee when they were in college and lived above a gas station. And when I was in 3rd and 4th grade, we lived on the south side of Chicago, which was a pretty desperately dangerous neighborhood. There were people who, in our apartment complex, who regularly got mugged. They talked about stranger danger in school, and actually there was even someone raped at school. So pretty bad environment. But from there, we went on to a very leafy green suburb in Connecticut. And from there, I went to private school in Charlottesville, Virginia, and on to get a PhD at Harvard. So one of the things I learned from that experience is, you're moving around a lot. You have to make friends with different people. So I learned how to be curious about different people. And we've heard a lot about curiosity today, and I think that's a theme. Curious about different people, you get to know them, and you realize there are different perspectives. Like around the country when we lived in the South, this simple example, but we called a fizzy beverage Coke. And when I moved to the Midwest, they called it pop. And when I moved to New England, it was soda. So it's just like a simple thing, but people do different things in different places, and to have that perspective was really valuable. And what I learned was to surround myself with people from diverse backgrounds with different perspectives. And I think all through my career that made decisions better, more powerful. And the second piece I had a conversation with Duval Patrick about 5 or 10 years ago, and he's a black man that was 2-time governor of Massachusetts. And he and I lived a few blocks away from each other at the same time in the south side of Chicago. And he got a scholarship. Somebody philanthropically had offered a scholarship to him when he was in 8th grade, and he went to Milton Academy in New England. So one of the things that we both felt was so important was the benefit of education. And honestly, it doesn't matter if you go to the best school possible, but that you try hard and you work to get the best education you can in the environment that you're in.
Yeah, you've talked a lot about the value of education, learning that early on, the model that your parents set for you, and you talked about earning a PhD from Harvard, which really was the foundation, set the foundation for much of the work that you do today. But it was shortly after receiving your degree that you made a pretty meaningful pivot in your career, and you were talking about some decision making. So when you are considering a big life decision like that and other decisions you've made in your life, how do you weigh the risks and how do you build the confidence to jump in?
Yeah, I think it really relates back to things I said in the first question, which is, education. You learn how to do some research. And gosh, when I was getting a PhD, it was a really big task. So breaking it down into small pieces and then to get confidence in a decision, to get perspective from different people. So when I made the switch from geology to finance, it started with, first I needed to gather data. It's like, oh, I don't think I want to stay in the lab, which is what I'm doing right now. What else can I do in the world? And I took classes at different parts of Harvard University, at the Kennedy School, at the business school, and found out that they were looking for people like me on Wall Street, shockingly, but who had the math background that I had, the thermodynamics, and the heat flow equation in my dissertation was the same as the math for pricing stock options. So that was phase one, and I talked to my friends about it. I talked to the career counselor in Harvard and got different perspectives, and I seemed to be really excited about going in this direction. So I had data, I had the heart, and then I took it to the next level. I went to the events for the business school students, so being a little bit brave. And at one of them, hosted by Goldman Sachs, I talked to a guy named Bob Rubin. And I don't know if you know, but Bob Rubin went on to become Treasury Secretary. So I said, what can someone with my background do on Wall Street? Here I was getting more information, and he said, you could be in capital markets or be in fixed income or be a trader. But honestly, it doesn't matter. Just get yourself onto Wall Street. And so, with the advice of Bob Rubin, so be careful about who you seek advice from, right? And other people around me, I decided to make the change. And that has served me really well all throughout my career. I later became CEO of a company. I founded it. And, when you're a CEO, there are a lot of hard decisions you have to make, and you need to have the conviction of those decisions. So doing your homework and then discussing it with people who might have some insight can give you a greater level of conviction so that you can go out and have leadership and persuade other people of your point of view.
Mm. And one of the most recent decisions you had to make in your career was ultimately selling the firm that you founded. And as you considered the future for Athena Capital Advisors, you did have more than one path available to you. So as you evaluated those factors, what mattered most to you? And how did you ultimately decide what the right opportunity, what the right fit was?
Yeah, Emily, it was a challenge because we would often get offers to buy the company, and who was it really going to be? And we went through a process, gathered data to see what firms might offer in terms of the value of the company. And then when we narrowed it down to 3 choices, it really came down to what was most important, which was the cultural fit and the opportunity for everyone, all the stakeholders going forward, the employees, the clients, and actually the opportunity to make a bigger impact in the world, to have something strategic done. I got to meet Jenny Johnson, and it was wonderful. Here was a place that had a female CEO. They understood family values, the kind of people that I worked with in my firm, and I thought, okay, There's another firm that's offering a higher price, but this is the right thing to do. This ultimately is going to be the best outcome in terms of my legacy.
You mentioned having a greater impact, so I'd love to dig into a little bit more about impact investing now, because long before impact investing was mainstream, you were working with clients to align their values with their portfolios. So what first sparked your interest in that work, and how did you develop the confidence to pursue something that at the time was not widely embraced?
Yeah, well, the clients that we work with, I think like many of you in this room, were really quite wealthy. You know, they could care about things like philanthropy. They didn't have to worry about having enough money for retirement. So they could think about what was important to them, their values, their legacy. And of course, that's their children. What did they want to do with their children? What did they want to do in philanthropy? But also, people came to me wondering, how can I align my investments with my values? And that sparked a whole process. I discovered there were a lot of people who were interested in doing that. It started off with religious values and how do you exclude certain things in your stock portfolio. We worked on the environment, investing in conservation. How do you use your wealth to serve the poor? Investing in venture capital deals that might make a real difference in emerging markets. And then we did gender lens investing, which aligns with this conversation about using your wealth to have an impact for the benefit of women and girls, products and services, investing in women managers, and doing it in a way that's scalable.
Yeah. And so you started working with groups of clients, group of investors, shareholders. Can you tell us about some of the ways that you influenced corporate behavior and maybe even what those experiences taught you about corporate advocacy?
Yeah, we transitioned and added another part of our practice, which was shareholder engagement. And that happened, I remember the first conversation. It was in 2017, the day after President Trump was inaugurated. It was a time when the Me Too movement was very much in the press, and obviously a female candidate had just lost the election. So I went out to dinner with a friend of mine who was a client, and she said, "This gender lens investing is great, but what else can I do with my money to really help women? You know, what more can we do?" And so we decided to seek out different perspectives from investors like her, advisors like me across different firms, academics, women who served on boards. And we had a series of salons that we ultimately called the Women's Inclusion Project. But we would go around in a room and talk about ourselves and what did we think would have great impact, and what we came up with as having the most impact takes a very small amount of dollars to file a shareholder resolution. And large corporations have great resources. They have stakeholders that are huge. I mean, there's $100 trillion of assets in the world in the stock markets. And they have huge amounts of employees. So we decided we would file shareholder resolutions. And the second meeting, first one was at my house, the second one at this woman's house, we got a consultant in to talk to us about how to do shareholder engagement.
Right. So what were some of the issues that you focused on?
So initially we focused on women on boards. We thought that would be a great leverage point. We looked at women in leadership in large companies, making sure that the path to success was fair. And we focused on another area that was nascent, but there was a lot of harm to children in social media that was starting to come out. A lot of concern about sexual abuse and sexual abuse materials. And it was clear, you know, from the Me Too movement that women who've had some kind of sexual abuse in their history, that can really impair their ability to reach their full potential. So we care about our children, And we care about women, and so this seemed like an ideal issue to take up with technology companies to make social media safer for children online.
Yeah, protecting children online. That's an issue that eventually became more than just an investment or a governance concern. It became deeply personal for you. Can you share how that experience further shaped your perspective on this topic and influenced the work that you've done since?
Yeah, Emily's right. And I mean, the first company we worked with was Verizon, and we had a lot of success with them. We were a co-filer at first, and then the next one was Meta, then called Facebook. And we were pushing them to do a child safety report and some other things. And this got a lot of publicity because it was early on in the process. So we were going to have a press conference. And I asked my daughter, who was a senior in college and had just finished her senior thesis, Sarah, do you have anything, that we could use in our press conference that would be helpful? And she said, actually, Mom, I do. I think there's something you should know. And I said, okay. She said, you remember that time when I took a gap year between high school and college? I lived in Boston. I was like, yeah. I said, you remember that time when I wasn't very much in touch with you? I said, yeah. I said, I remember that you called me and you said, I miss my mom. And that's all I heard from you for several weeks. She said, well, I was on social media and I met a guy on Facebook and we talked about cars and music and things like that. And then when I graduated from high school, I decided to meet him in person. We got together, but he wasn't 18 like me, like I thought. He was actually closer to 40. And she got in his car anyway, and he kidnapped her, he raped her, he took her across state lines to traffic her in a very difficult situation with armed guards. She was just like property for them. It's hard to tell the story every time, but it was a horrific situation, and I can say the only solace is that she was able to be rescued. Her boyfriend found a way to get in touch with her and came, and it was like one of those movie scenes with like a shootout scene, cars driving backwards over the curb, and they were out of there with people pulling their guns. So she was safe, but she didn't want to tell me about it. She was ashamed, she was embarrassed, and they had said that if she escaped, they would kill her or her mother. So it was pretty intense at that time. So we talked about it. She wanted to go on to the press conference. And I said, no way. This is too sensitive. She said, Mom, I really want to do it. I really want to help other girls, other children, so this doesn't happen to other people. So she did, and she became an advocate for survivors.
She's a warrior. I had the opportunity to hear her on that press conference, and she really gave a voice to survivors and really helped press this conversation forward. And it's really important. Thank you for sharing your story. And so now you've engaged with Meta Verizon almost going on 7 years. Have you seen any meaningful change or progress? And what gives you a sense of optimism for the role that shareholder advocacy can have in making an impact?
Yeah, we did see change. Like, I'll tell you, the Verizon story was the first year with, a small amount of stock, filed a shareholder engagement. The management wouldn't talk to us. But we got 35% of the vote. It was over $50 billion of shares. So the next year, management was willing to talk to us. And we got a bigger vote. And the third year, when we came back, they said, well, actually, we've hired a head of child safety with some, very specialized experience, and we've actually put predators behind bars. We have worked with the FBI, and we did the child impact study you wanted, and we divested ourselves of of Tumblr, which was terrible. And we've improved, at that time they owned Yahoo, we've improved our search engine. So they became a model for the industry. They became a leader in the tech industry of how do you help protect kids online. And then we worked with Meta, and again, they didn't want to talk to us at first, but with over $150 billion in our first vote, and eventually more than 50% of the non-management shareholders voting with us, they took the things we said seriously and did some things to put off encryption, to improve age verification, so that adults like that man could not get in touch with children they didn't know, to make it safer, and improve parental controls. Now, of course, it's still not good, and there's a tremendous amount of harms on the internet. But something else is happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to touch on this because you have said from the very beginning that when you started working with clients, you spoke to the media, you were talking about shareholder advocacy, you said if, particularly the social media platforms, did not start to protect children online, the regulators will show up, and it will have a more damaging impact ultimately on shareholder value. So again, 7 years later, just looking at the past 3 months alone, big tech is having its big tobacco moment. So help us bridge these two ideas. You can be a social activist and protect shareholder value.
Absolutely. You know, we didn't file these frivolously. You know, I first learned something about shareholder engagement in around 2020. I worked with the Harvard Corporation on voting shareholder resolutions for the endowment. And only about 30% of them were worthwhile, really meaningful for investors. And we are investors, we're fiduciaries. So we really thought that besides protecting children, that Meta was going to have issues that were reputational risk, regulatory risk, litigation risk, and all of that came to pass. And then this March, they did have their big tobacco moment, Meta and also Alphabet, where a court first in New Mexico and then in California ruled that these social media platforms were harming children by design, and that they knew it, that the platforms were addictive. They were hurting children. And so what happened that week was that Meta's share price went down by 8%. We were right as investors. And they've had a lot of trouble around the child safety on the platform. There's litigation all around, not litigation, regulation all around the world now to try to make social media safer by design.
That's right. And so I think you may have inspired some in the room. So for those who might want to take that first step to align their social values, their worldviews, their beliefs with their investments, how do they take that first step? Are there any partners or resources to get started?
Yes, absolutely. You know, there's an organization called ICCR, the Interfaith Center for Corporate Responsibility, and they've been filing shareholder resolutions for over 50 years. They have a lot of free resources on their website, and you can look there to see what kind of activities are they doing right now, what's important. They have a free resource called Proxy Preview that describes that. And there are other organizations like Proxy Impact or As You Sow. But of course, you know, if you find it a little bit complex or daunting, you can always talk to your financial advisor. And you know, here at Fiduciary Trust, we do help our clients with shareholder resolutions if that's something you want to do. It doesn't have to be something we came up with. It can be something that's near and dear to your heart.
And I think we heard this on Abby's panel, and you've talked a little bit about, you know, aligning what's important to you in here with your investment specifically. But I think sometimes understanding what is important takes a lot of reflection. That's another dimension of your time, that you spend time practicing and coaching others in the areas of mindfulness and meditation. So can you just take a moment to share, how do you think those practices help people make more informed, more intentional decisions around the impact they want to make?
Absolutely. I've probably met the Dalai Lama more than a dozen times, and I've introduced a couple of clients to the Dalai Lama, but I started practicing meditation at a time when I was CEO and just had a tremendous amount of stress in my life. And I found, first of all, when I went from one meeting to the next meeting, just taking 2 minutes to take a few deep breaths and to clear my mind from what had happened before I went on to what happened next was super helpful. And so the first lesson there is that we have to put on our own oxygen mask first before we help others. If you want to do your best work for other people, you have to take care of yourself. But then I learned through doing more meditation that actually, gosh, if you spend time just being, not doing, then you're a little less attached to your thoughts and emotions, so that, a lot of times we see the world the way we want it to be, not the way it really is. And when you just stop and be, sometimes things bubble up, like in a shower,
Right.
They just come up, and you get to see more clearly what really is, not just what you're pushing against or what you wish would happen, but how it really is. And if you're going to make a decision, isn't it better to deal with the facts? Yeah.
See the world
More successful.
as it is, not how we want it to be. Yeah, that's right.
And for whatever you really want. And obviously at those pivot points, I had to look really hard and deep inside myself. So your friends can help you. You can listen to them and see how you feel about it. But really reflecting deeply yourself to find out, what do you really care about?
So I have just one final question for you, and in the spirit of today's theme, what's the one thing that you hope most resonates with the women in this room about their ability to create change and own their own stories?
I think it is, you're all amazing, and you have the ability to create change. It can take just a small step. You can change the world beginning with a small step. One more thing.
Go for it.
Just, that's that step to look inside yourself and see what it is that you really care about and what is yours to do in the world. And just go forward with that. Just do it. Just try, and it'll matter.
Lisette, thank you. Thank you for your time
Thank
today.
you.
This was great. Yes. Thank you for your perspectives, and thank you all for being here.